curious, selfishly, and then also for the audience, what's the design process like at Adobe? What makes products at Adobe great?
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, again, it goes back to, in some way, like my own approach, because I think that the process has changed. And, when I first joined Adobe, I was looking for that process. Like, well, how do you do this? And honestly, like I couldn't find a good answer. Everybody did it kind of slightly differently. But I started to sort of draw out, the things that I needed, those pieces, that foundation of what became, like my own process, what became the process of the teams that I was working with, which was really starts with research. Honestly, like I think that's where all great design, whether that's print
Yeah.
design, whether that's web design, whether that's product, native product development design, all the best design starts with research. Not like it doesn't have to be like like not everyone has the resource of like having a researcher, kind of on staff and sort of to be able to complement and do what they do best. But just that research in terms of, again, like having a very critical eye, a very thoughtful eye, towards the problem, right?
Yeah.
And the landscape that problem
Yeah.
kind of lives within. And then just the awareness and the curiosity that you need to have, to be able to kind of think, both at times very broadly, but then also kind of bring all those things together, into a cohesive story, right?
Yeah.
Like those, like that's research in the sort of broadest sense that I sort of mean it. That the best designers are paying attention to the world. They're thinking very deeply about why and how these things work, and some things don't work. They're evaluating really kind of everything on that at that level,
Yeah.
and then they're taking that and they're folding that into their work, right? So all
Yeah.
the great work starts with research, and then from there at Adobe, what we normally do is we really make a kind of a narrative deck, I would say. A deck that sort of encapsulate kind of an end-to-end experience for whether it's a workflow or a feature that we're pitching, or a product or a whole product that we're pitching, that really synthesizes that research, into a story that feels very tangible, that people can really wrap their heads around, that they can really, really evaluate and give us feedback. And whether that feedback is internal feedback from executives or team members, or whether it's external feedback, right? So that early phase of developing the idea is always one of getting feedback and developing it further, and just sort of, continuing to hone the story. And if you're lucky, along with that becomes a sort of phase of prototyping as well. So not only you're sort of building that narrative and building that case, right, that you're also prototyping. You're developing that idea. You're experiencing it, whether it's a design prototype, whether it's a prototype from code. You're learning and you're iterating and you're testing and evaluating those learnings and developing the idea. And then kind of once you sort of, you feel good about this, that's when you sort of move from that ideation phase into the production phase, and of course that's now the real work starts, right? Now you got to take that idea and go make it real. Let's go put a plan together on how to get from point A to point B. And that was probably one of the earliest lessons that was really hard for me to grok initially, really hard for me to sort of unlock. And it was really an engineering manager who I was working with on the early days of Creative Cloud, the service of not just sort of digital distribution, but also, cloud-based workflows, for the very first time at Adobe, these two things. And I remember sort of one day sort of sitting down with him, and they were stuck in a very thorny part of the development phase. And I had, of course, me as a designer, I just kept designing, right? Just kept iterating, just kept pushing it for, further and further. And I remember sort of leaving this design review one day, and the whole engineering team was just like shell shocked. And they're just like, what just happened? And then the after the meeting, the engineering manager kind of sagely took me aside, and he's like, the team, they love you. They love the work that you're doing. He's like, but you have to help us. You have to help us get to where you are, because we're still back here. And he's like, also, you have to figure out how to get from where we are to where you want us to be, but we can't throw anything away. We can't start over. We've just done, 3, 4, 5 months of work. He's like, you've got to think deeper about where we are, and really help us figure out the steps that we need to take to get to where you want us to be.
How was the transition from designing, more graphic stuff to UX and software?
Yeah.
What was that journey like?
I think my background, and of course the things that really drove me as a designer, like really kind of set me up for success from transitioning from kind of what would be a more traditional design related job, to, a field that, had a name, UX, UI, user experience, UI design, information architecture, that approach that I brought to any project, holistic, end to end, thinking very critically about the mediums of communication, their capabilities, and then thinking about how to express an idea or about how to help someone be successful, a user be successful in achieving a goal or an outcome. Like it actually, again, other than like the technical details of it, the technical details of development, on these different platforms, on these native platforms, I was pretty well versed in the web at that point, dabbling in web development on the side. But to really, wrap my head around that, again, the sort of the technical production, of these very complex applications. Like I said, barring that, like I felt like I was ready. I felt like, again, as a designer, and a designer who thinks very critically, very holistically about a problem and about the problems of their clients or the problems of their users, like I feel like that applies kind of across the board. I don't think there's really anything that sort of divides these, roles or titles, other than the experience with those technical
Mhm.
those technical sort of implementations, of that design.